all to the Local Wood, Local Good breakout session. If you thought you were coming to Wood Energy, you should go next door. This is Local Wood for Local Good. I want to thank you all for coming, and I just want to give you a layout of how we're going to run this breakout session so that you know. So my name's Ellen Kaler. I'm the Executive Director at the Vermont Sustainable Jobs Fund, and we're gonna run this kind of like some case studies. We have a number of wonderful panelists here, which I'll introduce in a minute, and each one of them has a different perspective on how they look for opportunities to use local wood. They have challenges that they've had over the years, different ways around those challenges that they've tried, and they're going to be sharing those stories with us. And then what we want to do is open it up for discussion, and hoping that those of you who have also thought about how to use more local wood in various ways, that you could also share some of your stories of opportunities and challenges. And then at the very end, I'd like to leave enough time to have a little brainstorm about what are some themes that came up today, or ideas that maybe you've had that, gosh, if we could just do such and such, that we could try to capture those ideas, because one of the parts of this wood product industry network that we're developing over the last year is that there's these things called action teams, and we have a local wood action team that's been meeting for about 6, 8, 9 months. It grew out of a meetup we had on this very topic a year ago? No, 2 years. Was it 2 years ago that we did that? A year and a half ago. And so that group has been meeting and thinking about what are the kinds of projects that we could try that would help to link better the supply and demand of local Vermont wood. There's a couple more chairs in here. Come on in and sit down. There's a chair over there and over here and over here. Grab a seat. So that's how we want to have this next hour and a half go. So please be thinking about what you can contribute in terms of ideas, things we might be able to try over the coming year. And there's lots of opportunities for you to get involved. So this notion of how do we in addition to growing amazing trees and having healthy forests, how do we add more value to the logs that are cut here in Vermont? This has been a topic of conversation for decades. So much frustration about seeing log trucks going up to Quebec and then coming back as finished product, and always asking the question, how do we retain more value here in Vermont? What could we be doing? And over the years, there's been a lot of different projects. The Sustainable Jobs Fund and Kathleen at what was the Wood Manufacturing Association worked on the Cornerstone project to try to get, back in the early 2000s, a little predated my time at the Jobs Fund, but really working to try to get the universities and the state government to source more local wood into building projects. There was efforts at getting certified wood more sourced into projects. There was just a lot of different activities over the years. And nothing has really quite stuck. Nothing has really quite worked. And so we're at this point where we want to raise the question again, like, what more could we be doing? So I just want to introduce our panelists. Joe Nelson's a forester. Mike Rainville at Maple Landmark. Andy Harper at Winterwood Timber Frames, and Tony Fletcher from Vermont Green Mountain Grain and Barrel. Each of them are going to tell you a little bit about their businesses and how they use local wood. And to kick it off, I thought it would be helpful to just tell a little story about a project that the Sustainable Jobs Fund did with Allard Lumber, Champlain Hardwood, which unfortunately is no longer, and Copeland Furniture. And Amin Driver from Copeland is also here, so she can weigh in later if I say anything wrong about what we did. So just to kick it off, because we really want to try to understand together sort of what worked, what didn't work, what were maybe missed opportunities, where was the market just too much to overcome, for instance. So our best intentions just didn't play out. So the basic idea was the concept of an effort that happened, I guess we got going in 2007, 2008 with Red Start Forestry, was how might we aggregate the supply of Vermont wood harvest from smallholders? We have all these smallholders across the state, it's really hard to get at their forest timber to be able to get it into the market. And we wanted to try to connect the supply with demand upstream. And we wanted to test, could we actually retain the chain of custody? Now, this was an FSC-specific project, but put that aside. Think about it from a Vermont-grown perspective, really. We wanted to craft the story of how forests were managed, where the wood comes from, how it supports jobs in the industry. What's that local place-based marketing that we might be able to do a little bit better to get consumers to want to buy more Vermont product? And can we actually capture a premium which could be shared amongst the members of the supply chain from the landowner all the way through to the manufacturer? Now remember, back in the FSC days, that was the big promise that never materialized, was that the added cost of becoming certified was going to be paid for then ultimately by sales to consumers that wanted those attributes, those values, and would pay for it. So we wanted to test that out. And because our land ownership pattern, we had 87,000 landowners in Vermont, we have all these smallholders, the question that we were trying to grapple with was, how could we aggregate harvests in large enough quantities to then be able to supply manufacturers with those products, with those the logs, in order to be able to then tell the story of how the tree becomes the table, becomes the bedroom set, becomes the bowl, and really capture consumers' interest in local. So this pattern, though, however, creates a lot of challenges. There's coordination and timing of all of these small harvests. There's coordination of log supply for the mills and challenges in pricing for these smaller harvests. There's aggregation of lumber supply for wood manufacturers around species, volume, lead time, consistency, where it's challenging to know exactly what's going to be coming out of any given harvest. So as I said, we started back in about 2007, and so as part of this project, we wanted to see, could we actually set up a forecasting database of wood harvests across smaller forestry operations so that we would know how much pine, how much red maple, how much oak would be coming off of any given job. And therefore, could we match those jobs with manufacturers and others that wanted those species? So we set up a pilot project, Allard Lumber, at Red Start Forestry to start with, based out of Corinth, Allard Lumber down in Brattleboro, Champlain Hardwoods out of Chittenden County, and Copeland Furniture out of Bradford. And we did the pilot for about a year and a half or so, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And then one of the other things that then grew out of that was we realized that just one forestry operation wasn't going to be enough, because Red Start didn't have a lot of red maple, and for a while Copeland thought they needed a lot of red maple, so we needed to bring in other foresters who had access to more red maple. So an actual business plan was written, and the Forest Partnership L3C was created amongst 4 different small forestry operations. And the idea was, could we combine our harvests, pay attention to our harvest schedules, knowing what kind of species were going to be and volumes were going to be coming off of these harvests? Could we let manufacturers know this is what we're going to have, and then could we get that wood to those folks that wanted it? We had a good start. It was a good idea, and then the market crashed with the Great Recession, and as Armin will say, some of the demand that they expected to be there for consumers just ultimately wasn't there. And so there were deals that were done, but it was really a trickle, and it basically has more or less ceased in happening. So the initial market opportunity was driven by Copeland saying that they wanted 250,000 board feet of Vermont-grown FSC-certified sugar maple for a new line that they were going to make of exclusively out of sugar maple, this Harvest Island line. And then they got the potential to have a deal with Crate and Barrel, and they were going to need 500,000 board feet of red maple. So that's what we were responding to, that we wouldn't have been able to have this pilot had it not been for Copeland saying, we think we have this potential market opportunity. So what we did was we intentionally figured out how to manage the material flow from the forest floor to Allard, through Champlain, to Copeland, and then Copeland took it to the next level through its stores and connections to its retailers' operations around the Northeast. Was it more beyond the Northeast? Nationwide. So the results as of January 10 was that the project moved 310,000 board feet across 12 landowner harvests. 3 consulting forestry firms participated. There were 9 different loggers that were involved in the process. Allard Lumber paid a premium, I think it was somewhere in the 10 to 15% range, to these FSC logs that they brought in, and then passed that premium cost on to Copeland. And at the time, maple prices were down. So instead of reducing their price to consumers, they kept it at what it had been, because what they were doing was then capturing the extra cost that Allard was passing on to Copeland, and Copeland then passed it on to the consumers. But what it meant was that the loggers and the landowners split the cost, or the premium between them. So we were, again, testing this out. Is this something that could work? The lessons that we learned is that the landowners were actually very interested. Red Start developed a letter that went out asking if you want to get your land FSC certified, this is why, this is what will happen to the logs, we'll go through this process. They got a lot of interest. There was a lot of challenges with changing existing, we had to contend with the changing, with not changing the existing logger mill owner relationship, and managing that was definitely challenging. Drawing from a larger wood basket made it easier, having multiple forestry operations involved. Collaboration takes time and money, but it can be really rewarding, and that was one of our lessons learned. These folks had never been in the room together before as a full group, talking about their mutual interests and a desire to create more opportunities for each of them. And how could they work together to do that? Foresters, one of the big things we found was that foresters had different models in terms of their process of developing forest management plans. Red Start, in the process, developed an access database that was GIS-based so that they could actually see where the wood harvests were going to be and what was the volumes and the species that were going to be coming off of those harvests. The other foresters that came into the forest partnership were still, everything was in paper form. So getting it converted, for instance, to an electronic system was really challenging. It takes a lot of time. The marketing and promotional materials for the process were really important. We really relied on Copeland because they were the interface with the customers. They developed, you had a story on your website, you had materials that went on various bedroom sets that told the story, cards and things. That was really important. The aggregation really helps to maintain the market access because we had larger volumes. And we did find that there were new opportunities for collaboration along the supply chain that could, in fact, benefit everyone. But we struggled with the market piece, with the demand. So the Forest Partnership website still exists. I only put this up here because you can see that when they built this website, you could click on it if you were coming at it from a landowner, from a forester, from a wood products maker, or for a wood products user, so that you could take a look at what you could access. And Ben Machen from Red Start, he was unavailable to be on this panel, which is why I'm saying this instead of him. Really worked hard and talked to so many different manufacturers about their needs, and just ultimately that matchmaking and having enough time, in addition to running a forestry operation, to do that work proved really challenging. And I'll just put this up here. You can't read it, but this is basically an output from January of 2010. It probably would look a lot nicer now that we have better computer programs. But this is basically an output of some of his, what was under management by him. And these ones right here show you where the harvests were going to take place. And over here, it indicates what years the harvest would take place, the amount of board feet, the species, and the volumes anticipated. So that the idea here was we could get multiple foresters to be able to aggregate their harvest data we could see a much larger volume and then figure out how to direct that volume to the manufacturers who are saying, I want more local wood. So that was the basic concept of this little project that happened for a few years. So I want to turn it over to Joe, who's going to share a little bit about some work he's been working on with Shelburne Farms, another example of sourcing and moving local wood.
Thanks, Ellen. I was just looking at that presentation, and to me, I'm here sort of from the primary side. I'm a forester. I'm also a landowner, and to me, it's when I think about that kind of model, I think the landowner is really key in that model. And when I think, and I know there's a few other foresters in the room, when I think about harvesting schedule, it's not always, we put together management plans, especially those enrolled in the current use program. It's a 10-year plan, and it's got a harvest schedule, and you don't always follow the harvest schedule. There's always things involved that change that schedule. It might be markets, it might be weather, it might be the landowner saying, geez, I really don't want to cut wood this year. And so having the landowners on board, I think, is really, really important. And just before I quickly start my thing, I just want to point out that, you think about this morning's talk, and I know there was some discussion around the health of our forest and the harvest levels. And if you looked at that fact sheet, and it is surprising that we harvest about half of what we grow in the state of Vermont every year. And it's always wondered why. I could see if it's maybe 70 or 80%, but it's only 50%. And there's lots of factors involved in that, but that's one factor. That's one piece of data that really always perplexes me, that we grow twice as much as we harvest. And like Robbo mentioned, at some point that's going to come back to bite us as our forests become overstocked. And then I also want to point out, I'm looking around the room, and I see Eric Parenti from Sursasimo Lumber, the largest sawmill. Raise your hand there, Eric. The largest sawmill in Vermont, down in Brattleboro. I think it's somewhere around 50 million feet or so, hardwood and softwood. We got Bill Sayre from A. Johnson, another large sawmill in Bristol. We've got a lot of capacity. We have Colleen Goodrich with Goodrich Lumber in Albany, Vermont. Pete, from Clifford Lumber, Pete Gardner. So we've got a lot of representatives. We've got a lot of capacity right here in the room, and I think it's great that everybody's here. I'm going to talk about a small project, and I'm going to really come at it from the landowner's perspective and give you a little description of how that works and some of the challenges. So I've been working with Shelburne Farms in Shelburne, Vermont. It's about a 1,400-acre farm. Primarily, it's farmland. There's about 350 acres of woodland. Probably most of you have heard of Shelburne Farms. It's pretty well known. And it's a nonprofit, primarily educational facility, but they do have woodlands, and they use their woodlands for timber management, and also for education. And over the years, they've harvested probably a lot less than growth, like the rest of the state. And their model has been that they don't want to just harvest, have a logger come in, pay them stumpage, and then the wood goes off somewhere off into the hinterlands. So they've contracted primarily with one logger, Richard Levine. He's up just in Colchester area. They pay him an hourly rate to do the work, and then they hire Leo Boutin, who's got a portable sawmill. He's from Williston, and they harvest. And their harvests are very irregular. Sometimes they harvest because they have some salvage to do. They've got some plantations that we've been working on, so they've been harvesting some of that wood. And they saw up both hardwood and softwood, and then they've been storing their lumber. At one point, they were storing it all in a barn, a large barn with a large volume, and they would have people come and buy lumber from them. And they really liked the idea, let's just do it direct. And they tried it direct for a while, directly with the customer, And it was working out great. They were getting tremendous prices, but it took a lot of time for somebody to go in and show somebody all of the inventory so they could buy a couple of boards. So it was just way too much time. And so then they said, well, what's another way to approach this? And that's where the Treehouse mill shop comes in. They are a custom retail outlet in South Burlington, Vermont. They do flooring, plywood, countertops, butcher blocks, live edge, and they're also a mill shop. And Carl Farnsworth is over there. You can raise your hand. He's a representative from Treehouse. So, and at one of our meetups that the Working Lands Enterprise Board did, those two got connected. It was Lucas Jensen, who runs the Treehouse, and Marshall Webb. They got connected and they started talking, and finally they figured out, well, let's do something here. So, and the way it's worked out is Shelburne Farms will do harvest. They'll tell, and we know exactly what the volumes are, the harvest volumes are, because we measure tree by tree. And then we'll notify Treehouse that we're coming up with a harvest. An example that just this past winter we did about 6,000 or 8,000 feet or maybe 10,000 feet of maple and about 6,000 or 8,000 feet of red oak. We let them know this was coming, and they said, well, we want all of your maple. So we did the harvest. We brought in Leo. He did the sawing, stacked it all up. And then the logistics are, and this is, I think, a challenge for us, is that the lumber went, Treehouse came and picked up the lumber, I think it was on a truck from which they received a grant from Working Lands Enterprise Board to buy the truck, so that helped them a little bit. They would come pick up the truck, and then they would take that lumber to New York, to a kiln, and have that lumber dry kiln before it came back to the shop. There's a challenge there, is a little bit of a bottleneck, because they always aren't first in line to get their lumber dried. So it would take 2 or 3 months for that lumber to get back to the shop. And then Treehouse will sell that lumber direct to customers. And the advantage, because of Shelburne Farms and a lot of the folks that are coming in to shop, they know the Shelburne Farms name, and Treehouse advertises it as lumber from Shelburne Farms. The sale is made, and then there's a commission paid back to Shelburne Farms. That's the financial arrangement. So that works out great. We've only done probably 7,000 board feet over the last 3 years. There was a lot, and I forgot to mention, there was a much bigger supply of lumber, but Shelburne Farms had a fire in one of their barns, a lightning strike, and it burned up, I think, about 50,000 board feet of really nice hardwood. So that put a hurt on it. So it's a small amount, but it's working. And I know Treehouse is now, they're reaching out to Gagne Lumber down in Pittsford, and they're also reaching out, I believe, to A. Johnson to maybe make additional arrangements to try to generate more direct sourcing from within. Am I running out of time? Okay. And they're starting to build on it. And there's a lot of challenges, but it's working. Mike?
Hi, I'm Tony Fletcher. I'm from Green Mountain Grain and Barrel. So we make white oak barrels for the craft distilling industry. We've been around for about 2 years, and right now we're doing it part-time. There's 3 of us. Some of the challenges that we have encountered are, first of all, that white oak is a pretty uncommon species in Vermont, so right off the bat we're at a disadvantage in the fact that the wood we're looking for isn't common. Another challenge is that we're such small scale that we don't have a lot of buying power. So when we go into a log yard and we want 1,000 board feet of logs or 2,000 board feet, it's really difficult to get that. The purchasing schedule is irregular because it depends on when we have time to produce barrels. So we have also have our some competitors of ours that are out of the state that are buying logs from Vermont, Some of them are being exported to China. Some of them are being exported to Canada. There's also stave producers in Ohio that are buying wood from Vermont, producing the barrels in Ohio and then sending it back to Vermont as a Vermont product, or at least a Vermont wood. So that's a frustrating thing for us. So some of the things that we've tried to do to try to get around this is to get ahead of the supply chain. We've been working with landowners and loggers, foresters directly, and that's been good in the short term. As we grow, as we expand, unless the harvesting increases for white oak, which there's only going to be a limit to that. We're going to be experimenting with alternatives. White oak has traditionally been used for barrels because by law it has to be a white oak barrel for it to be considered bourbon or rye or any other major whiskey spirits. But there are other liquors that can be used with any types of barrels, so we're going to be experimenting with that. We expect a lot of challenges, but we're no stranger to challenges. We're good at solving problems. And so that's what we've been doing. We also have we've been working on increasing our production. All three of us that work in the company are full-time employed. Two of us are in the Vermont National Guard. I retire in 2 years from there. Thank you very much. So it's not like I can just quit my job and do this full time. So there is a time where we'll be able to increase production. We did receive a grant from the Working Lands Enterprise Board, and that's helped us to purchase a stave jointing machine that's going to increase the speed in which we produce staves. But again, the time that we put into it is going to be a limiting factor, and availability of wood is the other big factor that we have right now.
Sounds like as Tony starts experimenting with new woods in those barrels, he might need some testers, taste testers. Just to,
I have that under control.
you do. I tried. My name is Andy Harper. I own a business called Winterwood Timber Frames. We're located in East Montpelier, Vermont. That business started about 16 years ago in Chelsea. We were in a very small and not really supportive building, especially for working with big timbers. So 3 years ago, we built a new shop on Route 2 in East Montpelier. Great exposure, fantastic as far as the appeal there. We also were able to create a new wood shop where we have complete millwork facility, so molding, straight line ripping, sanding, planing, etc. So we're pretty much trying not only to build anything that we might typically use in a residential project, anything made out of wood, but we're also doing custom work. We have 6,000 board feet capacity in our kilns. We have 2 kilns out back. We've actually just started to dry some wood for Treehouse. So when you said they had to go to New York, I was kind of like, no, it's not here. So that custom side, that collaborative possibility is growing all the time. It's not a huge part of our business right now, but we're hoping to continue to make that as such. And we also, one of my unique challenges has been my background is in forestry. I went to college for forestry, and when we started to look into timber framing, I didn't really want to just call up a mill and say, send me a truckload of timbers. I was much more interested in making the connections with people who either owned the land themselves, or foresters who were managing, or loggers who were making their living from a parcel, and trying to gain some quality control that way also, but hoping that I'd be able to buy at a slightly cheaper rate if I was buying logs. that's worked out pretty well over time, and to date, we rarely buy timbers. I'm almost always buying logs. So people are calling me and saying, hey, Andy, come out in my, the back 40 here. I've got some awesome, we do everything out of pine unless somebody needs something otherwise. And so I get to walk around people's woodlots and see what they've got, and then I offer them better than average money for those logs. But then somebody else comes in and does the logging. Somebody else does the trucking. I used to own a sawmill, but not anymore. And so now we're sending it to another local sawmill. And we're trucking it again to the timbers to my shop. We cut the timbers and we're trucking it again to the. So if anybody wants to become a trucker, I got work. So anyway, that's just the chain that's been working for me. Anybody here live in a timber frame? Do you know where your timbers came from? Okay, how about you? Yeah, there's another. No clue. Okay. Most of the people that we have talked to, usually they don't know, but it's becoming more and more. There's an appeal here to the owner to say, oh, so you know the guy where these trees were growing, and some people will come to us and say, we've got great trees on our property, we want you to make it out of this. And I say, that's fine, we're happy to do that, and we have the capacity to do that. However, you're not going to save the dollars you think you might, because there is an economy of scale that they can't realize. And unfortunately, that actually adds cost to the overall project, but it's still keeping it local. Quick story, I was up on a job site a couple of days ago, and I still do all of the bulldozer work when we're first breaking ground, and it's just sort of a thing that I like to do, even though these days I spend most of my time in the office. So I was up there, and I put down my clipboard with all my important notes on it and got back to work, and then I realized I didn't know where my clipboard had gone, and sure enough, I had dozed it into the ground of this particular job site. And it was my clipboard that I've been using for no less than 25 years, and I had the back covered with stickers and all the various things. So somewhere along the line recently, I picked up one of these stickers, so I got a new clipboard going, and it just seemed like the right thing to do. And we are using this local wood, local good as a true appeal to people. They really go for it. They like the concept of the wood coming from people I know, basically, right around East Montpelier, right around Washington County. It's having an effect. It takes a long time to get people to understand, but they like it. We are also doing more with our millwork. We're finalizing our showroom right now, finally after 3 years, but we're making butcher block countertops, tabletops, stair treads, risers, railing components, flooring, paneling, wainscoting, cabinets, fireplace mantles, etc. Pretty much anything that would come out or would go into a residential project. Some of our challenges have been not being able to get perfectly sawn wood. So even though I own the logs, the local sawmill may or may not make them perfectly square, or 90-degree corners, or not hit the dimension right. So timber sizing and planing is a limitation in my area. I can send them to one of a couple of people, but that costs more money. That's more trucking. So that's one of my issues. With white pine, blue stain is also an issue for me. We built a big woodshed this past year to try to mitigate some of the precipitation issues with that, but that's still a work in progress. And as far as my hardwood sourcing, that's probably more difficult. We've tried buying logs. It's probably not worth it because almost everything I use, we tend to be select and better grades. So, you buy a log, you get a little bit of everything, and I really don't have much of a use for the lower grade stuff. But I also don't really want to pay retail prices at Treehouse or Lathrop's or A. Johnson We did buy some of the lumber from Shelburne Farms a couple of years ago, and that did work out well. And then inventory control is really just the other thing. I can't get too far ahead in terms of buying in wood or buying in logs. I just don't want, so usually buying winter cut pine is the best. But this time of year, if all of a sudden we get new jobs, or in the spring when the mud is still prevalent in the woods, we might have a delay. So that's just been one of our challenges that way. But I would say for the most part, my timber sourcing has been pretty good. It's my hardwood stuff that's a bit harder.
So I'm Mike Rainville. My company is Maple Landmark in Middlebury, and we're a manufacturer of small wood products, toys, gifts, and games. Been selling wholesale for 39 years now, so been at it quite a long time. We sell nationally through various channels. We've always focused on local material, local wood. Right now we use about 100,000 feet of hard maple a year, about 40,000 feet of eastern white pine, and a little bit of oak and cherry and a few other things into the mix. In terms of the supply, we're pretty fortunate that the kind of products we make using hard maple is ideal. Durable, strong, easily machined, nice and clean if you're wanting toys for kids or other decorative things. And that's what grows around here. So, I know a lot of companies that are in the woodworking business. There's that whole conundrum of, gosh, cherry or walnut or something else is the demand, and you just either don't find it in Vermont or you find very little of it. So I don't have a whole lot of challenge necessarily finding what I want, although I do have to work my supply chains because I want to buy Vermont material, at the very least Vermont milled material. As Joe said earlier, there's no wall around the state, so logs travel across, and the mills are often on the margins of the state. But it's important to me. Our customers come to us because they like that we're American-made. Our competition is foreign, and so they want to be sure that not only is it American-made, the material is local. However you want to define that, I define it as pretty close by. And I don't necessarily have a lot of challenge with that, as I say. So what's my deal, or what's my concern? And I, just in my involvement with the industry I've really wanted to see a better supply chain in Vermont of the material, because it just doesn't make a lot of sense to be trucking stuff in and trucking stuff out. And I know there's a lot of other economic factors, but so I was just thinking, how did I get on this bent that I'm on, and whatever. And I've always had a real strong sense of place. And I started woodworking when I was in grade school, and I would hand wood burn on the back, that it was Lincoln, Vermont, because I live in Lincoln, shops in Middlebury, but and it's always about the place. And then, well, what about the material? When I graduated away from going down to the building supply and buying pine boards, where I graduated into hardwoods and things, I had sources within 6 miles. Within 6 miles, there's Johnson Lumber, there's Lathrop's Mill, but there was Tom Lathrop's maple supply, and I could go down to his racks and buy anything in whatever quantity I want. Well, if you're small, whatever quantity, maple or cherry or walnut or mahogany or whatever he happened to have. And, in thinking about it, I see woodworkers, people doing woodworking up and coming that may or may not be making a business of it or whatever, and the first place they hit is Home Depot. And I was talking to somebody a couple months ago, and they were into woodworking, but they were buying their lumber mail order. how does that work? And it's a knowledge of accessible supply. And Tom Lathrop, I mean, we've been doing business for 40 years. He's still there selling stuff out of his racks, but he's not 6 miles away from everybody. I like the Treehouse model that's working. It's similar, where they're bringing in material, making it available, and certainly Chittenden County there's a lot of people there that are looking for that kind of thing. But is it accessible? And then the other part that I've always really liked about the woodworking business, it is infinitely scalable. You can start in your garage and you can build and you can grow it, and at every point it works in some fashion. You get better equipment, more space, bigger markets, different product line, you shift around and things like that. But is the lumber available in those various scales? And that's where the challenge is, I think, where okay, maybe you need 200 feet for a project or something like that. And there's most of the woodworking products enterprises in Vermont are 1 or 2 people in the shop, and they buy for a project. And so what can they do to get that material? And that's a concern to me. Now, I buy larger quantities. I'll often bring in a trailer load of material. I don't always do that. The closer the people are nearby, it's easier to bring in a lower quantity. But just in general, I'd like to see a supply chain that worked better. So I'll leave it at that. You go.
Thanks. So just to kind of piggyback off of what you're talking about with local wood, for many places around the country, they try to stick to local just because it's good for the economy, it's good for jobs, it reduces cost in a lot of cases. For my specific industry, making barrels, it's really important the quality of the wood, and it doesn't have to be a veneer quality log, but it's just the even a select log. You're looking at a product that is grown over a very long period of time, very slowly, and the grains of the wood that are present in logs that are trees that are grown in Vermont are much tighter than trees that were grown in warmer areas. And when you make a barrel, it's very obvious when you fill it with a liquid that's precious to a lot of people, whiskey. It's very important, the tightness of that grain, and there's a reason why they're taking Vermont wood and they're sending it out of the state and out of the country. It's because it's different than a lot of other places. So I think it's important to recognize that local wood isn't just necessarily about the local economy and jobs and just nice to have stuff nearby. It's really a better product altogether.
So thank you all, and I want to open it up for questions of our panelists, and also encourage those of you in the room. There's a lot of experience in this room. We'd love to also hear your stories about how you think about local wood sourcing for your own businesses, how you interact with different parts of the supply chain, some of these questions around logistics, around marketing, around connection to consumer demand for these products. What are you seeing? What are you hearing? Is anything changing that you're noticing? I remember, Mike, you talking when you were on the Working Lands Board about how consumers were really flocking to you because of the paint scares coming out of China and the toys. So there's shifts that happen many times out of our control, but we can take advantage of them. And so I'm really curious to hear from you all about what are you seeing, what are you hearing, what are the challenges that you're grappling with. And if you have specific questions for any of the panelists, please also. I think that mic off of the camera can pick you up, so I'm not going to pass the mic around. So any questions, comments, examples, yeah, please. And say your name and where you're from. And
I was wondering if any of these folks up front have gotten a premium by marketing local wood, the way FSC certified tried to get a premium. I'm curious, are you getting a premium?
Well, on the Shelburne Farms experiment with Treehouse, definitely is a premium. There's a commission, and I can't remember exactly what the commission is, but Shelburne Farms does get a commission for all of the sales. But it's also important to note that, when you think about a log, you're going to get the top grades, and then you're going to get a lot of the lower grades. And quite often, I think there's a challenge with what to do with all that lower grade stuff. And I think somebody else mentioned that here. But on the majority of the wood that goes to Treehouse from Shelburne Farms, and they have to pay all the trucking, all the logging, and there's a split on the drying. There's a lot of costs, but in the end, Shelburne Farms, the premium is somewhere on the higher grade stuff is somewhere around 100%.
Is that because it's the Vermont brand or the Shelburne Farm brand?
It's probably the Shelburne Farms brand.
Any other?
So relative to our competition as a domestic manufacturer is already a premium, but our use of local material and how we market it helps to justify that. It makes people feel better about spending that extra money. That it seems to be true to what we're doing is true to what they would expect for what they're buying and what they're seeing. So it's not that we can charge X amount more, but it just helps to keep us in the game. Basically, it's part of our marketing.
Yeah. I would say a similar thing in that usually it's about the story that I tell about where the materials are going to be coming from, which helps a person usually feel better about deciding to work with us. They don't actually see how much the wood costs. It just gets wrapped into a building contract. So they don't really know exactly what those prices are or how that might compare to the next timber frame down the road. But frankly, there's not likely going to be a huge difference there. But yeah, it is a premium. I don't just give it away.
My customers are local craft distillers, and they are, in a lot of cases, really trying to keep the local product. They're paying a premium for their malt, for their corn, for their grains. We're not charging a premium for our barrels. We're just trying to make an honest profit. But we went to these distillers with our idea before we began, and we asked them if we could make the same barrel that you have right now in Vermont at the same price, would you switch to us? And there wasn't one person that said no. So we're not charging a premium, but I think that we have a huge advantage over people outside the state.
Yeah.
I'm kind of
Say your name and then
I'm
where you're
sorry.
from.
Dave Wilcox. I'm watershed forester for FBR, and also on the Vermont Woodlands Board of Directors. In the Shelburne Farms example, Joe, they are a tree farm as well. Does that play into their marketing? Is that helpful? Because there's other, obviously other tree farms in the state that are certified, third-party certified. And also another question, with that low grade that comes up, does that shape how you implement your management strategy, or does that just give you more challenges in marketing that low grade, and where does it go? What do they do with that?
Well, to the last question, I don't know where the low grade goes. I do know that, and maybe Carl might have an answer to that.
We have a 5,000 square foot mill shop, so we can use it for countertops, protect all the splits and checks and knobs, so we leave it in if somebody wants that. So we have that capacity.
So you can utilize some of that.
And as to the first question, and again to Carl, I know, and I've been into the shop, and they're doing a great job of displaying the Shelburne Farms logo and the Shelburne Farms name on the stacks of lumber that did come directly from Shelburne Farms. I do not know if they put the tree farm label on those as well. Do you know, Carl?
I don't think that's a big job. I don't think there's too many people that care if they want local or something like that. And I don't know if they be familiar with the tree farm. You know, everybody sees it, you're driving around, but I don't think that's good for us. Nobody's asked for stuff off the tree farm.
So there's a challenge for us right there.
I think it's a good way to
It speaks to the
start.
communications question that
Yes.
was raised in the morning down.
Right.
And I think that means we're not doing a good job of letting landowners and consumers know what that added value is.
Other questions? Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Eric Parenti with Fish Small Lumber Company. I think Tony said our region grows exceptional timber, and the world knows it, and the world wants it, and I think we'd be surprised how much logs are exported out of this region to China. I mean, it's a phenomenal number, and it's because we have this exceptional resource, and they all know it, and they all want it, and they're paying for it. And you mentioned the white oak or the dry kilns, and I think more of a connect, and I'm at fault like most people, connecting because we have dry kilns in Vermont. We have white oak in Vermont. Just that connection to get together and get our names and local wood, local good.
Do you have any ideas about like what would support those connections happening better?
You know, the communication, I mean, this internet website, I mean,
Yep.
with your help or,
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. You guys have any comments on that?
And I drove all the way down to the southern part of the state. We're up in Richmond in search for white oak, and we've been doing this for about 2 years now. And about 4 weeks ago, there was a harvest going on in Richmond, and lo and behold, there was some white oak there, and I've been driving by it every day, and it didn't even occur to me to look there because I just didn't think there was white oak there. There's a lot along the Champlain Valley region and the southern half of the Connecticut River Valley, but I just kind of assumed that there wasn't any there, and
yeah, most of ours comes from either Massachusetts or New York.
right. So you don't really look at like the
Right.
small little stands that have stuff going on, and they were going to use it for firewood or but luckily I was able to rescue it before it got sent off to China or whatever.
Thank you.
Joe, any white oak in Shelburne Farm?
Well, there's a little, but not much.
My name is Chip Ogg. I'm a small furniture maker in Chipman, Vermont. I'm also representing the Guild of Vermont Furniture Makers, where we have 30 small shops around the state. And every single one of us loves to say that this is made out of local wood. It helps us to sell what we're selling. People feel very good about that. And as was just mentioned, having a website with what's available, with who has it around the state would be big for our furniture making community.
Great. Thank you.
Can I just ask you a quick question? You said you have about 30 small woodworkers in your group.
Yes.
Do you ever get together and think and maybe forecast and think about how the group combined could maybe go after sourcing some of your wood as a group as opposed to individually? Or maybe you already do that?
Well, that's we get together 4 times a year, and sourcing comes up a lot. And but we're making some of our furniture shops are fairly big, six people. Most of them are 1- and 2-man shops. It's hard for us to predict in advance what we're going to be making in 6 months. It's all custom.
And if I could just add to that, I'm John Lomas, also a member of the Guild, John Lomas Customs Manager. The customers really like the idea that you're going to pick the boards for their project. So Treehouse is a really good resource for me. Lathrop and Johnson, because they'll let you go down to the racks and pick through. So it's very hard for us to get together as a group and say, let's consolidate, because
I want that board.
Apart from the fact that might be able to fight, we we just buy in such small quantities that, so Treehouse is a pretty great resource. You buy from Craigslist? No.
Go ahead.
Should I?
Well, I mean, some small places advertise through Craigslist.
Most of the time it's not killing them.
But it's actually handling the board, looking at the grain. Yeah. Is a big part of it.
Go ahead.
I had a quick question. I'm Andrew Pierce. I have a small woodworking shop in Hartland, Vermont. And we buy logs, and we have a pretty specific requirement for size and grade and species of what we use. And most of the wood that we use comes out of upstate New York. In my opinion, when I talk to my customers, I consider that local. The guy that my log supplier that I buy from, he says that a lot of the wood that we don't buy is getting put in containers and shipped overseas. And so 5 hours down the road, 6 hours away, for me seems local, but I guess I'd be curious to all of you, does that qualify as local wood if it's coming, I mean, it's coming from another state, but what I need isn't available in Vermont.
So why is it not available? Walnut.
Well, most of what we use is walnut, and it's 30 inches in diameter, 25, 30 inches in diameter.
Yeah.
So it's not here.
No.
And that's 60% of what we make. So it's a big chunk of it, and the other part is high-grade cherry. And again, it's in large diameters, and it's like a grade B veneer log. And so I'm trying to buy as close to the shop as I can, but is I guess what my question is calling that locally sourced not correct?
You guys, do you want to answer? Yeah.
I think that's between you and your customer, and just, it's just telling the straight story of whatever it is. If you're saying it's Vermont material, then you got a problem. But if you say local, sure it's local. And we often have to tell a little bit more backstory. We often tell a little bit more backstory about our material just to inform people. But it's the reality.
You say maybe Vermont, but I'm not telling you the logs come out of Vermont.
Right, and that's fine. That's been long established in the wood business. That's okay. That's where the craftsmanship happens.
We've been trying so hard to be so local that even deciding to buy a couple of pallets of maple from Gagnon Lumber, which is only an hour and a half away or 2 hours away, and still in Vermont, sent us into oh boy, are we local? If we do this, and in the end we said yes. That still qualified.
Sounds like a local food movement.
Ken was happy, and I was happy, so everything worked out. But that it really does come down to how you're telling the story to the customer and what they expect. Almost, I don't think. There's been twice that I've bought some wood from just over the border into New York, and I describe it as such, just over the border, so, but that, I don't really think anybody has, hit the brakes because of that.
You want to go Karina, Bill, and then Brent.
Can I just
Oh,
keep
sorry.
on?
Sorry. Yes, please.
Sorry. Just from my perspective, my customers are, like I said, they're very interested in a local product, and they are marketing their products as Vermont grown this, Vermont made this. So for them, a product that is Vermont wood is more important. Any wood that I can get locally, whether it's New York or Massachusetts or Maine, is more local than what they've been using. So they're understanding that. As the same issue with sourcing walnut, white oak is also pretty rare in Vermont. So the trees don't know where they're growing. If the acorn falls into Lake Champlain and happens to grow in New York, it's the same tree that it would have been over here. So I consider anything in the Northeast, New England, to be local, and if you can do it closer to where you are, it's better. But I think as long as, like we said, if you can explain that and be honest about your branding, I think that's about the best we can expect.
Yeah, so I'm Karina with Vermont Woodworking School, and we founded almost 11 years ago. One of our founders was a furniture maker, Bob Fletcher, and he was a master of making brown maple look like everything else. And what I wonder, he used to use aniline dye and hand rub finishes to make these beautiful cherry tables or black walnut tables or, even early American pine out of brown maple. And what I wonder is, are there furniture manufacturers that are really doing that? Pottery Barn can be taking wood that's grown rapidly, that is going to crack and split, and sell it at a premium. Why can't we take brown maple, which is everywhere, and make it look like cherry and make it look like walnut and still be able to use it? I think with bowls that are holding food, maybe there are issues with, being able to finish it, but a table that you eat off of, it seems like we could be doing more. And I have seen some Vermont companies that are doing that, and I have seen a lot of tables on the market that look like beautiful walnut tables, but they're tiger walnut. You're like, oh, that's maple, but it looks just like walnut. And if we are plentiful, and if we can help with the technical assistance on that, Mario Messina is an excellent finisher and would be happy to teach anyone how to do that.
Any comments from the panelists on that one? Any examples of that you want to answer to Karina's question? Anybody doing it?
And I'll say we did it for a while when we first started Vermont Woodworking School. We also made and upholstered headboards for a company in Ankeny, and they came with legs. And so it was the cherry. Would you like the cherry finish leg or the walnut finish leg or the maple finish leg? They look just like what the customer expected.
Interesting. Great. Bill, go ahead.
Bill Sayer, A. Johnson Company, and Sustainable Forestry Mission Certification. It seems to me, Ellen, that the story is very important. Everyone's beginning or has understood it. The rest of us are learning. But to answer your question as to what we could do, it seems to me meetings like this, that working group you have, where we're learning about the kind of woods that different companies require and want, and they learn about what we have. That's a big step forward. I think it's been missing up to some time. So this meeting, one like it, for the answer in my view.
And so we need some more people to join that action team, right?
That would be fun. More the merrier.
Do you want to say we've got a couple of projects that are bubbling, right?
Well, we're actually experimenting with one that would use the internet to bring people in. I think the issue of trying to hold a separate inventory is very difficult to accomplish, even at least at this time. But you can use the internet to accomplish the same goal. Finding out people have what they need. As Joe mentioned, we, as an outcome of that project, developed a relationship with partner Lucas at Treehouse. And we're figuring out a way so that we can communicate with him when certain species is coming through the mill and it's going through the kiln, can make a smaller quantity available in the normal truckload quantity, which is our normal either truckload or retail, a very small quantity. What they're talking about, Treehouse, is something in between. And we're experimenting, and so far so good.
That's awesome. So just as a reference, so this local wood action team, what Bill was referencing, as I mentioned first up, has met a couple of times and is going to be meeting again after this summit with ideas that you will help to populate for the group. But one of the ideas is around some kind of a computer platform where you can post what you have or what you need, and then through that. And so the group right now is experimenting with a couple different platforms. I think Facebook is one of them, right? To see what would be easy, because we don't want to spend a lot of money to create some fancy new website and then nobody uses it. So we're looking for existing platforms that we can test run. And so one of the things, once the group itself test runs a few things, then the next stage would be to have anybody else that's interested in test run it. We want to be sort of hit on. And then if that proves out to be useful, people start using it, then we can build from there. So Erin from the Vermont Woodworks Council is taking notes, and that's why I would just encourage any of you that find that this is interesting to you and you might want to get involved in the local wood action team, let her know so she can add your names to the notes. And then Christine can follow up with you about when the next meeting is going to be. And it's a very action-oriented group. The intention is that we come up with tangible projects that are product-oriented. We work on them, and then if we get through the end of the pipeline of ideas, the group dissolves or it morphs into something else. So you wouldn't be signing up for the rest of your life to be part of a group that just meets. Like, we're really looking for tangible projects. So we need good ideas and people that want to actually help make some things happen. So, Brent.
Real quick, you pretty much hit on one of the things. For years I've been saying, when I was a kid, you could go to the junkyard, and if they didn't have the part you needed, they got on a computer and found another junkyard that had the part you needed. I mean, that was a long time ago. And so I don't see why we can't do that. Why can't all the smaller mills especially just put down what they have? It has to be maintained. There's a lot of things I understand, but if they were doing that when I was a kid, then I think they can do that now. And then that would be, if I get on there and see pictures, or that would be great, or at least know that they got some 6/4 maple, and say, you see you got some 6/4 maple that's still there. Then I'll go get it. But I'm not going to go there hoping. You know what I mean? So anyway, that, and the other point I have is, so I'm Brent Carter from Clear Lake Furniture, and so I have a great location on Route 100. I get a lot of very wealthy people, fancy cars pull in all the time, go through the showroom, hopefully they buy something. So what I'm doing, I got a working lands grant to make a kitchen showroom that's going to be all Vermont wood, all Vermont stone, all Vermont artisans, as much as I can. Can't find anybody that does a good backsplash yet. But anyway.
Somebody got an idea on that one?
It's going to be, anyway. I have, in my mind, I have a responsibility and an ability to help. You know, I'm going to be picking up the flooring from Joel Courier this afternoon. And, you know, have anybody been to his place? I mean, it's pretty hard to get there. You know, you got to be you got to have.
You got to move.
You got to have four-wheel drive.
I'm a woodchuck. What can I tell you?
I'm just saying, the retail customers that I work with are never going to go to his place. They're never going to see that beautiful wood. So they come to my place, so I have to figure out a way to show off his stuff, and it's not hard because it's beautiful. We talked about how the wood is beautiful. So I think there's some responsibility, like Copeland, you know, worked to try to make that happen. But I think we've got, in Vermont, you have both kinds of people. You have the bloggers, been hearing a lot about that today. I'm learning a lot. But they're usually not great marketers, not so great with the story, not so, that's fine. Get me the wood and I'll tell the story. I'll get the extra money. You've got a cruddy looking piece of maple, but it's got, maybe got two, I can book match them together. I don't have epoxy. I'll get top dollar for that, don't worry. And I'll buy I'll pay top dollar for it. And it's junk. It used to be junk. Now they're starting to realize it's not. But anyway.
No, I think it's a really interesting idea to think about how you all could
We have both.
marketing each other's products.
The Stows of Vermont,
Right.
and the Killingtons and the Ludlows and the Strattons, where you got these gojillionaires coming up, and you know, but they don't. I mean, look at this floor. What is this floor? Oh, it's tamarack. Awesome. What can I do? You know, I often have architects and specifiers that come through there, and they might want truckloads of it. I'm not going to buy thousands and hundreds of thousands of trucks. Who knows who's going to see it?
No. Go ahead.
I'm Jake Langmate from Yale, Vermont. I mean, I'm small, low impact logger / sawyer / master of none, but that is one of the main holdups that I have. It's the same thing that you were saying at Shelburne Farms, the selling to go out with someone. And I realize that, you know, it works two ways. The woodworker to come and buy a couple 100 feet for a project, I mean, it takes them time as well. It takes me time to go through my inventory, you know, like in order to sell it. And that's the main holdup for me, is just taking that time. And I mean, not even getting rid of the, you know, all of it. It's selling the good stuff is not worth my effort, is what it, I mean, it's pennies per hour is what you end up, by the time that you've done marketing, you know, that 100 feet, but
Have you thought of
that's
other?
But if you can sell to me, who's selling it to the final user, I'll pay more for it than you think.
Well, and that's the whole, but it's just.
Maybe not, I don't know. I mean, I'm used to buying it, so when I started, right, there was no such thing as any of this, so you would just buy thousands of feet from Rex or wherever. I mean,
Frank, can I sell you some wood?
Yeah.
You're paying so much?
So that quarter saw walnut, it's like this wide, I'll take some of that.
So have you thought of anything that would be helpful to you?
No, but when you were saying about some type of there needs to be some type of a source or
Yeah.
something in order to go and bridge that gap, because that is the big gap. I mean,
Just supply and demand finding each other.
well, it's
But in species, in quantities, in size.
without taking up,
Efficient.
Yeah. I have no idea how to do that, but I agree that is a main holdup on both ends, is what I'm.
I think there's another issue too that Monica Prusick, I worked for private industry for a long time, now I'm a private forester. But one of the things I was hearing here is that there's the foreign competition too that actually puts a big world of hurt on the resource availability. And that's, I think, a subject matter that needs to be looked at, as to how do you compete with that? You need this local connection, a central location that you can market, that people know they can go to as a resource and they know how to move wood in or out or to and from. But the global aspect of the demand that's put on this New England resource that is unique it's in volume, and it can make a big difference. And I don't know if it comes through an incentive program that you communicate to some of the larger marketing reps that deal with the foreign entities, that a certain percent of what they acquire or resource has to stay local or what, I don't know. But, that's something that needs to be looked at because,
So incentivize it, finding ways to incentivize keeping the wood local.
To be able to compete, with the foreign players or be on, in the game. It's a different volume issue you're looking at there, and I think it can be done where you can still have a win-win and results.
Go, I know you got something.
Well, I deal with that all the time, and I look at Bill. So I've got, in a typical consulting forester, we manage a lot of harvests. I'm pretty small now, and I might manage 600,000 or 800,000 or maybe 1 million feet a year in harvests, and other foresters will do a lot more of that. And it's pretty common to you put it out to bid, or you do a stumpage sale, and it's fairly quickly you're going to lose control. The foresters are going to lose control of the logs because it's the way that it's being sold. And that's where I think the landowner comes in. The landowner's got to get, if they're really interested, and I've had this happen, if they're really interested to keep it local, they've got to be, and it's up to the foresters to explain to the landowners, these are your options, here's how we can sell your timber. You can go this way, you can go local, you can do this or that, but fairly often if you're going to, they might make a decision that they want to go a route to keep it local, and it's pretty common that they're going to make less money if they go that route. And it's a free economy, and I've got A. Johnson right down the road, and I've got Canopy Timber Alternatives just down the road from them. And sometimes, and I talk to my logger quite a bit, and we will discuss those two options. And sometimes it's better to go to A. Johnson's, and sometimes it's better to go to Canopy. And Canopy, you send it to Canopy, it's going to go to China, it's going to go to Maine, and it's going to go to Canada. And, but the logger's gonna make more money on some of the product, and the landowner's gonna make more money on some of the product. It's not a really easy thing unless it's a free economy, and sometimes those foreign markets are paying more. And it's hard to tell a landowner, don't sell it there, but and you're gonna make less money, unless we can come up with something.
Yeah, I think this whole supply chain just has not figured out how to handle niche markets. I mean, that's what it really comes down to, is there's no organized way to handle the niche demand, because there's a lot of demand out there, people willing to pay that premium. You know, I always get bugged when they say, well, gosh, you know, we can sell it out of state for more than we can sell it locally for. And I turn around and say, well, when I buy lumber, the first question I ask is not price. It's availability, and it's logistics, and is it going to be so you have what I need when I need it? And so somehow that's what we've got to figure out, is how to handle those niche needs. And that's, I mean, look at ag. I mean, farm to plate really is a niche, or certainly started out as a niche, but still the majority of the volume in ag is still commodity. And the volume in timber can still be commodity, but we've got to figure out how to incorporate the niche needs that can tell the story, that can make it easier for people to understand the logging and the value of the forest. So when Mike Snyder's they want to put out a harvest plan for some state lands, there's less pushback because people hear that story and understand it. So we just got to figure all those connections out.
Has anybody got some ideas about this communications conundrum? We did talk, and it came up this morning, it's coming up here a bunch. What could be done to really get the consumer, the end consumer, to better understand why local wood is really good on so many different levels, from forest health to local jobs to local economic activity to the quality to the community sense of place, all those kind of things. Right? You have some ideas?
I wasn't going.
Okay. All right. You don't have to.
Thinking more about the landowner role here, and the fact that is a niche landowner as well, who really would be willing to focus on a local market if they knew that was an option. And I don't think there are a lot of landowners who understand that they have some control over where that wood goes. For me as a landowner, I'll take a little less money if it means I can keep it local. I think that there's a niche of landowners.
That's an education.
It is an education piece. So they need to have that option brought to them. They need to understand that is an option. And I don't know, is that the forester who needs to do that with the landowner?
It's quite often, I think,
It's the forester. So is that who we need to work with? The foresters to make sure that message is getting to the landowners?
Well, that's what the Copeland project, basically, that's what the starting point was a letter to the landowners saying, do you want to do this? This is what we can guarantee because we're going to keep the chain intact.
So how do we scale that up? To give that opportunity.
If we really scale that up, is there capacity in the state to handle that amount?
I think it's a small slice. And I think it's a small slice that feeds the secondary market too.
Then you get into the chicken or the egg.
Yeah.
If it was there, maybe there'd be more woodworkers in Vermont.
Or maybe more sawmills in Vermont.
Right.
Joel?
Yeah, to follow up with you, Joe, yeah, I think it can be. I mean, I'm a small producer in terms of sawmills, but we did the project with UVM where we went in, did the cutting. Some of the lumber came, the logs came to our mill, we're going to cut them, dry them, and put it into flooring. I think there's more out there. Granted, we're going to stay small. We're not going to be a big high production mill, but we can step sideways pretty quickly. And we can do these special niche orders much quicker than perhaps Soshalsimo can. Perhaps not, but I think in small niche markets, we can move on those. So I wouldn't poo-poo us too much, but there's some possibility there. And another thing I'd like to follow up on is that from the user side, getting the information back to the suppliers. You know, like they spoke about at the Guild, if they can just forecast, it's not signing any contract, but just forecast what they might need, we could react to that in a relatively short term.
Mike, is FDR still doing the stumpage reports? They used to send out a questionnaire, maybe it was extension, but...
It was extension, or we wouldn't have the stumpage for a while, and so we have the mill reports, but no longer any kind of robust stumpage report.
But that was a good idea from the standpoint of a clearinghouse of relatively recent information, so that somebody could go, for example, we could have a clearinghouse of some sort of a questionnaire that went out to suppliers, let's say, and then you as somebody looking for White Oak could just go to that website and see where all the suppliers had listed, well, this week we've got, and, you know, make your deal off of that. But, just trying to imagine, I mean, I would fill something like that out if it came in a very simple format on the computer. I didn't have to actually mail it, you know, but that somebody else then could go and look at what that inventory is.
Yeah, the answer to your question about, you know, communication, how do you get this message out? I think it helps to look at wood products that people handle a lot, you know, on a daily basis. That's one of the things the local food movement has going, is that people eat every day, they buy food every week. But like the timber frame house, you know, once in a lifetime. But, you know, a cutting board, salad, you know, utensils, things that people come in contact with a lot, it might be easier to communicate through those products.
Yeah, great idea. Other ideas, questions to the panelists, or ideas around communication, marketing, logistics, and stuff that you're talking here. Going back to the website that we talked about for a couple of years now, the last summit, the local wood summit last May, that was the main takeaway from a lot of the folks, was that, yeah, this side starts communicating with this side, and this side starts communicating with this side, so we need something that's going to cohesively bring them together, but in a way where we're not faxing our inventory list to kind of drives me a little crazy. Like, it's insane to me to think about faxing stuff, and if that works, great. But after that summit, the local action or local wood team, Jess is on it, Christine and I are working on what we're calling this website. It's not going to be a website, but it's going to be an online pilot. And we have been working on it. We just have not communicated what we've been doing because there's a lot of things that have been going on in the industry. And so, but yes, Facebook is going to be one that we're going to try out, and I know that some of you all won't even touch it, so I need a second platform. And so the idea right now is Google, because Google, everyone's got an email. Right now we formed 2 pages, one on Facebook. Everything's private right now. We're just kind of playing around with it. When Andrew says that he's got something for sale, I'm posting on there and seeing, you know, with Facebook, obviously you have the capabilities of adding all the little pricings and the photos, and you can do that with Google Groups as well. But the only way that this is going to work, and we've been hearing this for many years, let's not focus on the communication with the consumers. We need to focus on the communication just here. And basically, we talked with the Guild. I don't know if David has shared this with you, but we are hoping that we're going to use the Guild as guinea pigs. But the woodworkers will be present. I think the only way that this is going to work is if the sawmills will communicate what they have
on a somewhat frequent basis. It doesn't need to be a day-a-week list. And I think the council is open to us kind of being the middleman for a little bit to see if there's a there before we start to potentially apply for a working lands grant for an app down the road. You know, we need to show some success. And if that's even in the beginning, me taking faxed inventory lists and scanning them in and posting them on. But I think as long as they see that there's an increased amount of communication, this will work. But what was said in the beginning, where we're talking the talk, but you have to be present and you have to be able to maybe bend a little bit. You know, if you don't want to do the Facebook thing, that's fine, but we just need a little bit of
So over the next year, we're going to be testing it out, and we encourage you all to think about being part of that. So we're just about to end the time, and I want to thank our panelists very much. Great. And if you're interested in this local wood action team and getting part of this process of generating some ideas and actually getting some projects up and running, testing some things out, please stick around and give Aaron your name and email so that we can let you know when the next meeting is. They're very productive meetings. We don't piss around. We like get right on it, right, Bill? And deals are being made in the process. I mean, that meeting happened, and Treehouse and A. Johnson found each other and now have business. So there's lots of opportunities for connection. And I really want to thank you all for being here. Great questions. And lunch is now. So how are you? Melba.